Fabulous. Does that mean we're also live, or when do we go live? Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are getting ready to kick off our Free Our People, Free Our Wallets town hall series. This series is entitled Fund Peace. We have a couple different episodes that we're gonna have. We're gonna have four different episodes between now and late July. This first one is just an introduction to the campaign of Fund Peace as well as why it's necessary here in Detroit. We have Detroit and Metro Detroit, I apologize. We have some great people on our panel here today, and I'm going to have them give a brief introduction as well as to tell us about their experience or when they hear violence interruption work, what does that make them think of? And I'm going to start with Ralph Gabi and Ilea Harvey Quinn.
Well, thank you, first of all, for this opportunity. Ralph Godby served 25 years Detroit Police Department, quite a few years as an executive in the police department, and my last 2 years as chief of police. And then I subsequently had a term of serving chief of police for Detroit Public Schools Community District. I served there for 2 years, and now I'm chief of staff for Triumph Church in Detroit. Their pastor Solomon Kinlock Jr. and really involved in social justice and dealing with equity in policing, so that there's a different paradigm that we look at what police work and public safety is. Police and public safety are not necessarily the same thing, although we exchange or interchange the terminology. And as far as my role or what I hope to accomplish is to have a different conversation as to what policing looks like in Black and Brown communities and what the engagement strategies are. Um, I am uh, a defund the police supporter, um, which kind of freaks people out being a law enforcement person. But if policing was working, we wouldn't be in the state that we're in. So we have to look at a different construct for public safety.
And when you think of violence interruption, what do you think?
I think of really dealing with social issues around poverty, equity relative to how we finance education, to make sure that the per pupil dollars match, wraparound services relative to mental health, and what those services look like on a constant basis in Black and Brown communities. Trauma intervention and to the extent we have police, a trauma informed police department to understand the dynamics of the communities that they serve. So for me, those are violence interruptions. Anytime you get to the point of making an arrest, for me as a police officer, that's a failure. That's not a plus. So we hold press conferences to talk about, who we arrested. To me, that's nothing laudable at all. But it shows that there's a failure on multiple levels, particularly in Black and Brown communities. So underemployment. So all of the things that accompany systemic racism and structural racism. If you don't address those substantively, you will not have meaningful violence interruption.
Yeah, thank you for that. Alea, if you can give a brief introduction as well as tell us about what violence interruption work means to you.
Yeah, my name is Alea Harvey Quinn. I'm the founder and executive director of Force Detroit. We are hosting this webinar and happy to have all of you here with us listening. Um, when I think about violence interruption, I think about the need for regular people to de-escalate their friends and family members in such a way that it does not result in incarceration and criminalization. I think about the need to have healthy conversation, sometimes healthy, challenging conversation, without those conversations escalating into physical or much less gun wars, right?
Mhm.
So I just think about us needing to reshape conflict and reshape how conflict is held in our community. You know, I was a young woman who needed regular de escalation. And thank God my community, my family was there to de escalate me and to intervene so that my life didn't go off course.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We're gonna go with Quincy next, and then Antonio, and then Keith.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, just for having me, just to be on this panel with such esteemed panelists. So my name is Quincy Smith, community organizer for Ceasefire Detroit. Ceasefire is a gang violence intervention initiative that is a national model, came to Detroit in 2013. I jumped on board in 2015 through a series of events. Don't want to get into that, but my path has led me here, and I'm excited about the work that we have done and will continue to do. And it's, for me, honestly, it's real simple when I think about violence interruption. It's invading the lives of our young Black men in the city of Detroit, specifically, because that's where I'm from, that's where I serve. When I say invade their lives, it's being intentional about spending time with these young men to raise the standard in our community.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like to me. There are a lot of pitfalls. We can talk about all of the, a lot of the things that Chief Gabi just mentioned, which is absolutely correct, from an aerial, standpoint. But, when you get down to it, for me, being on the ground, spending time with these young men, it's literally me, in our those who I work with. It's invading their space, invading their lives, spending time, being intentional about spending time, taking them and showing them a different path. That's what it looks like for me. Because if it wasn't gun violence, it may be something else, right? But what are we doing, right, as mentors, as community activists, as standard bearers? What are we doing to raise the standard in our community? And that's where I stand. And if we do that, if we engage, we get involved, we can turn this thing around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And Brother Antonio, if you can jump in and introduce.
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Antonio Cediel. I work on the National Live Free campaign, which focuses on gun violence reduction and decarceration. And I just want to say that, Mr. Gabi, I think we got to get you back into the force as a chief someplace, because there's not a lot of officers with that kind of mentality. That was inspiring to hear. We do so much work in trying to shift the mentality of folks, and it's hard to find chiefs who already start with that thinking. So I come to this work as an educator. I was a teacher and a high school principal in Oakland, and deputy superintendent of schools in Boston. Uh, and in Oakland, did a lot of work trying to keep my kids alive and free, basically. Used to, drive kids home from school and try to keep them from getting jumped or shot or whatever it was. And in my school, when I was a high school principal, we reduced fights by 75%. And, we worked hard, blood, sweat, and tears to make this happen. But, I've told this story many times. I had a young man shot in a drive-by shooting right in front of the school, basically on the steps of the school. And me and the after-school director were the first ones on the scene. And it just, the feeling of putting everything you had and trying to keep the kids safe, but it's still out of your control, meant that we needed a new set of strategies. And so we started organizing in Oakland around, getting some real intervention strategies. And we had heard about the work in Boston in the 1990s and different places, and we were doing a lot of faith-based organizing. So we keyed into some of that and basically said we should do something similar here. We started organizing, and it turned into Oakland Ceasefire, which got about 8 years in a row of straight reductions. Till this last year, 2020, blew it out of the water for a number of reasons. One of which is that the violence interrupters and the life coaches and all the folks we had out there with the social distancing couldn't connect in the same way. But so since then, we've been trying to help people build programs all over the country. And that's the bulk of our work. It's organizing work because it's trying to, arm wrestle with mayors and city councils and all those folks to actually fund this work. And that becomes the biggest issue, because all the mayors, all the police chiefs, they'll say, yeah, we want to stop the violence. And then you start talking about, well, making the investments, especially when you're talking about making investments with folks of color who have records, and then all of a sudden the conversation gets hazy, they start getting vague, and that becomes the real work. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we've been doing a lot of work at the federal level and have had some important victories around that in terms of being able to fund this work at scale. So great to
Yeah, we're going to jump into that after the introduction. So thank you for Brother Bennett, if you can give a brief introduction as well as give us what you think violence interruption work to be.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be a part of a panel that's strategizing for a purpose and not just talking. Have to always give respect to my brother, Chief Ralph Garvey. We started this work and wanted to do this work, 14, 13 years ago. So we've finally gotten around to being able to do that. Keith Bennett, former director and architect of the Flip the Script program, as Alea said, currently the program manager and coalition organizer for Force Detroit as of February of this year. Honored to hold that spot down. When I think of violence interruption, I think about my 4 decades of work and how it's evolved. I started out working with gang members who had exited YBI and went into, at that time they were using young guys and going into juvenile justice. So I started out with working with juvenile justice and then reentry to probation, then prison diversion. And when I think of that, I think of it as a holistic. I think that our young men and women, let's not leave out young women or women, but young men need so much, as Quincy said. There's so many needs that I wanted to create a vehicle where we can just address their needs in a holistic manner and not lose them in the handoff other people who did not feel as passionate. And so I think we have to navigate them. I don't like the term, and I've said it a lot lately, I don't like the term mentor, because mentor assumes they know something. And a lot of our guys don't know what they don't know, and they don't know much. And so I think they need to be navigated through the process and their development. And so I think that when I think of that, is that they need Black men, they need Black women, they need everything the community can give them, including law enforcement where it's necessary, but not overhanded, to lead them and navigate them through passageways where they feel safe and they know they're free to be themselves without it being a negative incident or something of that nature.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And that kind of like leads to our next point of where do we get funding for programs like this? And how do we sustain them for a long term? How can we affect and help as many people as possible on that off ramp through the prison system? So Antonio, if you could jump in and tell us about some of the work that happened federally to get this funding kicked off. You're muted.
I'm going to share my screen real quick so folks can see some of this information. Let's see. All right. So the last couple of months, we've been spending some serious time at the White House. We've been trying to organize around this at the federal level for, since the Obama years, with very little luck. And so we said, let's take it a shot again this time around. And we met with Susan Rice and her team in February, and a subsequent series of meetings after that, members of Congress. We just been, on this constantly, and we got some impressive victories for this work, because we know that the strategies work, the issues that we can't bring them to scale without major funding. And so, like I said, we spend a lot of time at the city level trying to scrap for crumbs, and so we need a real federal ask on this. So we were able to get the White House to propose $5 billion for community violence intervention work in as part of the infrastructure bill. And so part of the reason we wanted it there is because that's a better vehicle for trying to get something across the finish line than a standalone bill. And so we're continuing to advocate. So that's probably going to be voted around on, in the fall sometime. It's going to be a big fight. And so we got to keep up the pressure to make sure that members in Congress don't let that slide off the table during negotiations, right? Everybody remembers, when the COVID stimulus bill passed, the $15 minimum wage was on there, and that got cut off, right? So we're trying to make sure this doesn't happen with the $5 billion. But the fact that it was proposed by the White House is a huge thing. We came into the White House and we asked for $5 billion. Their heads kind of went back and they said, we never heard that number before. They expected us to ask for something a lot smaller. But the key to it, and I tell people, is that we were relentless with that number. In every meeting with the White House, we said $5 billion. Every meeting with members of Congress, we said $5 billion. With every interview with the press, we said $5 billion, until $5 billion became an entity that people had to respond to. At the same time, the president announced that he's proposing a little over $200 million in the annual appropriations bill for the same type of work. So we're keeping our eye on that. They'll probably be voted on in the fall as well. They invited us to the White House a few weeks ago to make some announcements around gun violence, particularly around this executive actions that the White House was able to take. So they identified 26 existing federal grant programs that they are going to prioritize for violence intervention, right? So that opens up the availability of, in terms of existing federal monies, as well as what's being proposed. And then what I want to spend a couple of minutes on today is just really talking about the American Rescue Plan money, which is over $350 billion that's going directly to cities, counties, and states. And I keep telling people it's Christmas. That money is there. It's not an application. It's not a federal application. It has already been approved. It's coming to a city near you right now this month. And so this is money that can be used through 2024. And so what we're pushing folks to do in cities, counties, states all over the country is to make very public asks about what they think it will take to fund peace in their city or state or county, and to make an ask over 3 years. So just to kind of give you an example, in California, overall, California is getting $42 billion. The state itself is getting about $26 billion, I think. The county of Sacramento is getting $301 million. The city of Sacramento is getting $121 million. So what we're telling people is you can make multiple asks to multiple jurisdictions. So you can in Detroit, you can make an ask from the city, and you can make a separate ask to Wayne County as well, right? And you can make an additional ask to the state of Michigan. And so, and a lot of our organizers are doing just that in cities all over the place. So just as an example, folks in LA, they have a coalition of about 15 different frontline violence intervention organizations. And that coalition has asked the city for $150 million and the county for $250 million, for a total of $400 million over 3 years. There's a Fun Peace California coalition that's now formed, and they're in the process of making a much bigger ask of the state as well, right? And so just kind of some key organizing steps is you want to make your request clearly in writing and in person to whoever you're talking about, the mayor, county administrator, whoever it is, and make your ask public. A lot of us have relationships with individual, mayors, city council people, so that's cool, but you got to make it public so that the rest of the community can get around it and there's transparency around that, right? Because you can get negotiated out of anything if it's just a one-on-one, but if you've got an army of folks in the community who are around it, you don't let up, and use the same method we used at the federal level. Just pick your number, whatever it's going to be, right? However many million, and just be relentless about that. Okay, and that's part of how you get that to be something that people have to respond to. And I'll just give you some quick examples. So our folks in Indiana, they made an ask of $117 million from the state, and they did a press conference, got press around it, so that's very public. People can now rally around that number and help push the advocacy around that. This is a op-ed I just had published where I'm in Orlando, Florida. And we were asking for $15 million from the county, another $5 million from the city. And we put it in an op-ed, so it's very public. And we're, following that up with letters to the city mayor and the county mayor. And use social media. So this is the folks in Illinois. So they create a whole Fun Piece Illinois campaign around this stuff with some beautiful artwork and a whole media platform around this stuff. So it's a whole campaign. It's a short-term, quick, got to get it done quick campaign, but the amount of money that is coming down the pike is historic, right? A $1.9 trillion stimulus thing, that does not happen very often, right? With $350 billion coming directly to cities, counties, and states. And the US Treasury Department, I'll just say this piece, has explicitly named community violence intervention as one of the appropriate uses of the money. So none of the public officials can hide behind, oh, this money's not for that. No, they said explicitly it is. So the idea is let's get this money. We got to get it right away. What I'm telling folks is it just comes down to sheer organizing muscle. Who can elbow their way to the front of the line? Because a lot of people are going to be coming and asking for this money, and there's deals being made and conversations happening internally all the time. And so what we need to do is get there, advocate loudly, and make it something they have to respond to. If they're not going to fund peace, they need to explain why, and they need to answer for it. So that's the overall approach that we're taking right now.
That's a lot of really good information. Thank you. So I want to jump to some of our panelists and just talk about the efforts that are currently going on in Detroit and what this kind of funding could do to help our violence prevention acts. If we could start with Quincy.
So, I mean, wow, it's a game changer. I mean, where do I start? Our team, these are folks who were doing this work before Ceasefire existed, right? Most of my team, they're returning citizens or coaches, activists. Ceasefire were here or not, they'd be out there in the street engaging with this demographic that we target. What funding like that would mean for us, it would just be unreal. Most of my team, pretty much all of us, we moonlight doing something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is where our passion is. This is where, we can do this if there's money there or not, right? So the passion is there. When we get that call, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we don't show up, there's going to be a dead body out there, right?
Yeah.
We sacrifice all, we get up and we go, because we know what that means. But to have readily available, tangible resources, right, that can support our members, and we don't call them clients. In Ceasefire, we call our folks members. To support our members, that cuts through the red tape. Currently there's a lot of red tape that we've got to go through. Submit this, submit that. 2-week turnaround time, to get a check, and what I mean. We can just cut all of that down because violence doesn't wait. There's no red tape when there's a shooting, right? So we need readily accessible funding where we can respond at a moment's notice. And a lot of times, my team, we're going inside our own pocket, taking money from, our children's mouths, right, to make sure things get done. And it's happened. Mr. B, you can speak to that as well. You know how that goes. So what funding like that would mean for this program, for Ceasefire, it would be unmeasurable. I mean, I can't even really put words to it, but it would allow us, what we've been able to do with scraping, you know what I mean, and with the bare minimum, I think, and I think it speaks volumes to the work that we've done. But that would ensure, I think, sustainability. It would ensure that we're broadening our sphere of influence and our sphere of impact. so it would, I can't even put I don't even know how to describe the impact that it would have for our team.
You're muted, sis.
I'm sorry about that. Mr. Gavi, if you could jump in and talk a little bit about the impact that you think it would have in the sphere that you work in and where you could see something like that going, that would be great.
I think first of all, it's a game changer. Antonio, thank you for your advocacy because to have voice at the federal level, particularly in the White House, is a game changer. So I would suggest, so I'm in the faith-based arena now. What I would like to see is something around a safe surrender program, because in order to cut down on the violent interactions between police and Black and brown communities, we have to have a different construct as to how we bring in people that are accused of crimes. Uh, White communities, they find a way to bring Dylan Roof in and give him Burger King. They bring Kyle Rittenhouse in as he walks down the street with an AR-15. If there's a belief we have a gun, Mr. Toledo in Chicago did what the officer said, turn, hands up, no gun, and still shot in the chest. So I would love to see some funding around the faith-based community, those entities that have relationships in the community, that if there's a wanted situation, give us a shot first to bring them in safely. It can be done. This is anecdotal, but I want to say a year ago, there was a young man that shot into a car and a 3-year-old was killed. He did not want to deal with the police, but fortunately I have a reputation on the street, and they reached out to me and asked me to accompany the man to police headquarters. Now, ironically, state police, they were pissed at me because they wanted to get him guns blazing. They wanted to go, they were planning to do all the stuff they do. Me, him, and a few community members, we walked in safely and he turned himself in. I think that we can leverage that a lot more. The second thing is more of a suggestion, Antonio, for another potential funding source. Because one thing about grant funding is not just the initial grant, but it's the sustainability of these programs. And what I would suggest that we need to have a conversation around is changing the equitable sharing formulas for civil asset forfeiture. Just let me do this real briefly. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. The Kennedys, which were believed to be the Camelot of America, our royalty, their family, they made all their money off of ill-gotten gains. They had the opportunity to clean theirs up and then mainstream and come into prominence, and they're still in prominence today. Civil asset forfeiture, which is not a criminal, but it's a civil process with accusations of crimes. They can take your house, all your cars, all your money, all your assets. Let's say the ill-gotten gains are really that. 80% of it goes to policing, to buy tanks and guns and pay overtime to continue to over-police our communities. That funding needs to be flipped. 80% of that needs to go back into the communities that it came out of. The dope was sold on Mac and Beatwick, so why does the police department downtown get a chance to get it and invest in more over enforcement? So we need drug treatment programs. We need programs to, as Keith said, to educate and habilitate our young people, because you can't rehabilitate somebody that hasn't been habilitated. So that formula needs to be changed. I'll give you a brief example. The very first week I was chief of police, July of 2010, my officers got a $3 million cash seizure. Now, as a chief of police at the time, with Detroit going through a heck of a financial issue, that money came to me. It came to our department. Can you imagine what could have been done with $3 million for a rec center, to pay some teachers, to get some wraparound services, psychologists or psychiatrists, to pay for some childcare, so a mother by herself struggling can go to work.
Right.
So those funds, they come out of our community and they're raped out of our community through criminal means, but then the community is raped again because those resources don't come back into the community. So we have to have a different conversation around that,
Yeah.
because when we talk about defunding, it's really a reallocation. So
Mm.
the money is there, it's just not appropriated correctly. So I think there's an opportunity to have conversation around civil asset forfeiture and how those funds are split with the community.
Mhm.
There's a pittance that you could use towards community programs, and it is not substantive at all. It would not even fund a real program. It'll pay a couple of salaries, maybe buy some, some gear to give away. But all of these perfunctory things that really don't change the dynamics on the ground for the people that need it the most.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Go ahead, Alea.
Where at on what level does each policing authority have the individual right to say what happens with forfeiture resources?
There are guidelines or federal for so well it's two pots. There's a state forfeiture which and they pretty much mirror the federal guidelines, but those guidelines delineate where the money can go. So for instance, with the $3 million seizure with us, there was a portion that went to the prosecutor for handling the case. uh, since it was a local seizure, we didn't have to split the money with anybody, we kept it all. But there was out of that 3 million or whatever we netted, you could only spend like $25,000 on community programs.
Mhm.
That's unconscionable because that money came out of somebody's pockets, because of a habit. When we look at the opioid issues, we look at everything that was criminalized when it was devastating our communities is now a medical health issue.
Yeah.
So if that money even went back into treatment, but those types of things. So Aaliyah, there are two different pots. So there's a state and there's federal. So if you have multiple agencies participating, then there's an equitable sharing formula depending on the amount of work the agency puts in. But ostensibly, the bulk of it goes right back into the police department, and very little is utilized towards solutions and some interventions that would ameliorate the need for as much police as we have in our communities. A lot of the programming that Keith did with Flip the Script, uh, those fun. Can you imagine if 100,000 of that, Keith, went towards some programming for you, Quincy, with Ceasefire, and that's a full time job. Can you imagine if we took those funds to fund that program to where you have full time counselors that you can run 3 shifts, and every time there's a shooting, you can respond to a hospital or to a school or to a family. So, some of the money is there, but it's making the right ask, and that's why I've kind of become an advocate on this side of the fence because I say I'm a black man that happens to be a cop, not a cop that happens to be a black man. So my affinity is towards healing our community first, and my job. And one of the reasons why I left DPS and Dr. Beatty is a wonderful advocate for kids, the whole child commitment. But that's $20 million of a budget. Can you imagine what that money would go to if you took police out of the schools,
Mhm.
took metal detectors out of schools, and
Yeah.
then you put that money towards psychologists and psychiatrists, paying teachers what they deserve?
Mhm.
So that's why we got to de-police. We just over police. But that was a long answer. But those are the two areas I think we could have some impact. So Antonio, I'd love to talk with you offline more to kind of filter that out and what that ask would look like. But definitely a safe surrender program so we can create safe ways for people to turn themselves in if they're wanted on warrants.
Absolutely. And I just gonna say, we definitely need to talk because we were just talking about we need to get some police chiefs on board to help with the advocacy at the federal level because,
Yes.
it sounds different when it comes from law enforcement. So we'll definitely talk.
Well, I'm either a unicorn or a pariah. I ain't figured out which one yet.
I hear you.
I'd love to assist with that.
Great.
Thank you. That's awesome. Dewan, did you hear the numbers that Antonio gave out earlier? I would love to get an introduction from you as well as where you see that those type of funds going towards for violence intervention work?
Yeah, my name Dewanzo. I've been engaging in a life of crime since I was 11 years old. I spent 14 years in prison. I was charged with manslaughter. I killed my friend. I also engaged in like violence with individuals who's been targeted for violence. Um, I understand the mind of like which if anybody been through it, they understand it as well. I understand the mindset of an individual like out there really engaging in a life of crime to where your life is at stake. And I understand the things that influence an individual's mindset, like an impoverished mind. Uh, a lot of times it's the culture as well. Like the culture is being controlled by people who exploit it. So you will have an individual that can actually stop something, but the culture is encouraging him to not care, to not put his time and his energy into it. And the culture is encourage the youth to try to be aggressive in a way to where the only way they'll be recognized or their masculinity will be recognized is if they willing to take life or they willing to harm. I know this to be true. You know what I mean? And I know the man who engaged in that type of lifestyle, once you then experience so much trauma, it changes. But I know these men do not have access to resources. Like I'm amongst them right now. I'm amongst men who were violent in prison. I met the man, I'm in his studio right now. He was violent in prison and robbed and pillaged in prison and on the streets. And now he out here giving back to the community and creating things for the community to be able to have access to without funding from government. So you have individuals out here doing the work, and the organization that I'm a part of has brought me in and like giving me resources to be able to do the work how I see it as effective. And I see it as effective in the sense of the people in my community. I make sure that I make the resources available for the people I know directly. A lot of times we need to go into these communities and get people who are actually from the community, people who actually have relationships in the community, people who the community actually respect. It's not always the person who have the title. At times, it's the person who's been over there, it's the person who's been communicating with them, it's the person who's willing to devote their time. But like one of the brothers said, nobody's getting paid what they're supposed to be getting paid, or nobody could like sustain living the way, like taking care of their family and still be able to do the work in the capacity that they need to do the work. So a lot of this, we got to stop violence even before it happened. And that means being able to appeal to the youth before they even start shooting, because once bloodshed has been shed, it's a whole different type of push to stop somebody from killing. Once you done kill somebody friend, you done kill somebody family, and they really cut like that. Like they really go take life. It's hard to turn that man down. I'm dealing with something right now where there's money involved. A man then got robbed for multiple pounds of marijuana, and now we got to try and resolve that conflict. We got to try and resolve that conflict before it turned into something. You know, and it's the funds need to be put in the right vehicles, the vehicles that are really willing to go pick up the vehicles who are really willing to go pick up those who actually need the ride. Not the vehicles who gonna blow past and just drive through the neighborhood and say they seen the neighborhood. The vehicles are who gonna allow the people who they say they serving to be in the vehicles, to sit in the front seat, to sit behind the wheel, or to sit in the back seat. The vehicles, like, they need to be put in play, and they need to be the proper vehicles. These vehicles shouldn't be hoopties. If you get my drift, like these organizations that really do the work, they should not be hoopties.
Yeah.
They should be real transportation towards a sustainable community, real relationships, real violence interrupters. Not nobody who's saying they're violence interrupter, but nobody knows them, nobody respects them. And we got to appeal to our music culture, our entertainment culture too. A lot of these rappers, they have influence, but that's where I see the funds got to go to the right organizations and the right people.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what DeWine is saying, and also Quincy mentioned this. Also, Quincy mentioned people moonlighting to do this work, because, and this is why where we find every city, you find brothers on the street who are just doing it out of the love of the work. They're not getting paid. They might get a little stipend here and there, whatever it is, but they're just doing it. And this is the part that to me is really criminal, because they're doing work that the police can't do, right? And so I had this argument with a local officer where I'm at. I'm like, your guys get a salary, they get benefits, they get a pension, right? And these other brothers are just trying to keep from getting evicted from their apartments, right? And they're doing something that you can't do, right? And so I was having a conversation. I was presenting, some of this work to a group of folks here in my city, and this young guy who was doing work in the community with youngsters, and I was telling him about this work, and at one point he turns to me and he said, "So you trying to tell me I could get paid for saving my people?"
Yes.
And his eyes started to get all moist, right? Like it was like, he's like, and his boss was sitting there because he already had a job, and he turned to her and said, "I'm sorry, I love what I'm doing, but I'm listening. He just told me something," right? And so I think that we get used to underfunding these things so that we are running hoopties, right? Rather than, fully funded Cadillacs that we need in order to make this stuff happen. And I think that lots of times people get used to, oh, I can rely on the brothers of the street to do this for nothing.
Right.
This does not require real funding. And that's the mentality we got to shift.
Right. And then you got getting killed, us killing. Oh, sorry.
No, just to Antonio and your point, I just want to say people are literally making day-to-day decisions about whether or not they can feed their families or do the work that the communities need. And that's what we have to escalate that point more. It's not okay to give people who do the crucial work of violence intervention contracts. They need health benefits. They need life insurance. They need decent salaries. They need to be able to go home and de-escalate themselves instead of trying to have multiple hustles that would make them choose how they handle this one contract. This one contract that they have is actually critical, vital, essential to the community. And like you said, Antonio, it's a skill set that's unreplicatable. It's a very rare skill set that's unreplicatable.
And I know individuals, I have a friend who's like known in the neighborhood, actually engaged in extreme violence, is documented, got into a shootout with officers. The whole community know how he is. It's a complete change now. So with this individual, he's doing the work and ain't getting paid nothing, like we just tried to bring him in as a fellow, but his integrity so intact. He actually told Keith, like, man, I can't do the training because I have to work. You gotta survive, and he actually can stop stuff, but you gotta spend the time that you could be helping your community or saving your community just trying to survive. And when we look at funding peace, and we look at the context of how much we fund war, how much people get paid to get on songs and get on TV and talk about being a gangster and being a killer and being poisonous. And we don't have anyone to put that same type of energy, that same type of drive, that same type of finance into saving themselves. Because if I'm vicious, you stand a chance of getting murdered by
Yeah.
me.
And to Dewan's point, I think is so profound. These are 2010 numbers. They did a study on the cost of a murder. And I think at that time it was about $17.2 million for one murder. They quantified it to the point that murder costs about $263 billion. So now if you start, because I think we have to make an economic case as well, because everybody's not going to be moved by altruism and just the love to try and save a Black life. I mean, we know that,
Right.
or brown life. But when you start to make the dollars and cents as well, if I paid Dewan $100,000 a year to be an intervener and to do what he does, if you look at what you save for every homicide that you cut, that's quantifiable. Now you're talking dollars and cents. So now you start to make a different conversation as well. So I think I think that needs to be a part of the conversation when the conservatives that, don't see the benefit of funding these types of programs. I think we have to be able to very concretely say, well, no, this is what it costs if you don't fund it.
Yeah, short commercial for Force Detroit. Visit forcedetroit.org to find those actual expenses on our website.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me say this. And I think people miss this. Dewan said that he did time for manslaughter because he killed his friend. Hear what he said. Not his enemy, not his rival. He killed his friend. So when we start looking at reducing crime or crime prevention, we have to go back to conflict resolution at its earliest points. We need to fund peace and teach our youngest kids when they first start exhibiting lack of self-control, lack of conflict. I don't care if they're in kindergarten or first grade, the money needs to be put into that to help them and their families start addressing that right then and there. We need to go back to the root and what sparks that antisocial behavior, because really in their culture, it's not antisocial, it is the behavior that will get you back. It is a breathable culture. And so we need to look at that as early as age. And so even when I was at Flip the Script, we were working with returning citizens, but we were also in the grade schools and middle schools teaching life skills, conflict resolution, anger management. And so we got to look at it. And then we've got returning citizens coming home with trauma that they got before prison and while interest. Then you dump them in a household full of trauma because baby's mama got trauma and the whole family got trauma. So we need to be doing intervention before they even get home with the families so their family can be whole and things. So we got a lot of issues that we need to address, but we got to go back to the root when the behavior first starts. Because as Dewan said, Quincy said, I think Antonio said, it is a tough lift when they get up there and that behavior becomes normalized and they're fighting for survival. So we got to start, the money got to be early on.
And Governor Bennett, to your point, I'm sorry, Antonio, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To your point, NIJ, they did their white paper studies. The best crime prevention program and predictor of future success of Black and brown young people was Head Start.
Yes.
Head Start.
Right.
So
and by sixth grade, they could do all kinds of predictions on this stuff. So to the same point, so I mentioned early on that at my high school, we reduced fights by 75%. When I got there, there was fights every week. One of the key things we did several things, but it was the conflict mediation program that we started, right? And when I talked about trying to start it, a bunch of the teachers, were proposing, oh, this student or this student, the A students. I said, nah, I'm gonna start with Clyde. Clyde is the young man. Every day I'm talking him off the ledge, right? Big guy, right? He was tough. He would mad dog everybody. And he had some academic issues, so he didn't feel good about himself. I gave him a job. I said, Clyde, you and me, we're going to stop fights in the school. And he became the initial conflict mediator, and he loved it because now he had a role right?
Yes.
He felt some love, right? And he had a sense of purpose, and no one would mess with Clyde, right? So that's, we started to build our team. So then later on, when I started to learn about the community violence stuff, it follows a lot of the same principles, right? And so that intervention, right, like you said, you start teaching those skills. Because I remember when I knew that the conflict mediation program was working, when I would have my most volatile female student comes to me first thing in the morning and says, Dr. Sediel, I need a mediation because I'm about to whoop her ass. Right? And so that meant that she understood there was an alternative to whooping her ass, which is come get a mediation, right? The word had gotten out that works, right? So that's a skill, right? She knows that exists as she goes into adulthood.
So one of the things I would like to say is in 2017, we lost 3 individuals and one was Hispanic. And I remember him greatly because teaching our men and young men how to resolve conflict. We lost one guy because he was trying to intervene in the fight and talk everybody down. They killed him. We lost 2 people because they were trying to talk it out versus shoot it out. And so I had to go in my office and cry. I'm like, are we teaching our guys the right thing? Because we lost 3 guys that returned to the community trying to do the right thing. And my staff came in and put their arms around me and they said, no, we're just not doing it early enough, Mr. B. We just not catching, and we're not catching enough of it.
True. When we look at, like, my brother, Omari Barksdale talks about this, like male masculinity, when we look at everything, and we look at when, like, you can look at a child's behavior in school and kind of predict, because I know, because I acted a fool all the way from elementary up in the middle school, and going through elementary, I used to feel like I was slow. And I got kicked out of elementary in 4th grade and sent to an elementary where my mother worked. And I still acted out. And my mother would come to work at 12 and she would put me in that closet and whoop me. But the whooping didn't deter me. Going into class and people seeing my eyes red, it was embarrassing. And I did not want to seem weak. So I said, man, I'm gonna do my work and I'm gonna talk later. I used to think I was stupid. I got 1.6s, barely making it. I flunked 1st grade and I felt slow. Like I really felt slow because I couldn't concentrate. And that's why I acted out. But when I concentrated and I learned to focus, I got a 3.5.
Yeah.
I got accepted in the Malcolm X Academy. And I got away from my mother and I went right back to trying to prove that I was this man. A movie shaped the whole way I wanted to be. I saw Boys in the Hood. I seen Doughboy. I said, that's who I want to be. I could not even comprehend that movie, what that movie was really doing or portraying. It wasn't for me to be Doughboy. It was for me to learn from Doughboy. But when we talk about this, we getting taught about TV. We getting taught about music. It's no push to teach a young man how to be masculine without being violent. Because masculinity is not violence, but it's being put out there like that. It's being put out there. When I went to prison, I learned something that I did not learn in the streets because those individuals didn't have access. So you have guys in prison who actually are revered, respected, but they still could be on a positive path, but everybody know what they would do. They taught me diplomacy, what you talking about, Mr. B, and what the other brother was talking about when he talked about the conflict resolution in the school. They taught me diplomacy. You should go into a situation being diplomatic, trying to come out with the best resolve. Like you don't want to put yourself in a situation where it's him or you.
Yeah.
You got to leave a door.
So one of the things I did, and this is not an I program, but I just want to put this out there, so especially Antonio knows. Last fall, I sent a proposal to 4 funders in the city of Detroit. And what I suggested was that we need to start a universal community-wide rites of passage curriculum and program that we would hit our young men with, regardless of what programs they were in schools. There needs to be a program where they can go to after school or whatever that navigates them through the rites of passage, life instances, and teaches all those things. And so 2 funders got back with me, but they were saying that because of the pandemic, they love the concept, because we have people out here who are teaching our young men that haven't been taught themselves. And Chief knows what I'm talking about. We have the wrong people actually training some of these young men, but we need to put the right men in, and we need to have a curriculum that everybody shares common values. A community is not a community unless it has some common values. And we got to establish that.
So I want to jump into the fund piece portion of it. And Alea, if you can talk a little bit about what we're doing, Alea, Keith, Antonio, just so people can have an idea of the committee that we're putting together and what they can expect and how to join.
Yeah, so I'll start, and Brother Bennett, you can jump in.
Okay.
So we've been inviting policy people and experts to a commission to take a look at our public health response to violence in Detroit and weigh in on what we think solutions are. And we want to come up with a set of recommendations that are generally acceptable by the stakeholders in the city and the people with expertise, and put them in front of our city's leadership so that we can have a venue to funnel some of these funds in. And then over the course of the next month to 6 weeks, we're going to be examining how these funds can be used in Detroit, exactly what's going on in Detroit, what's happening differently in terms of violence intervention in other cities, and things like that. So feel free to jump in, Najanava or Brother Bennett or Dewan.
Well, some of this goes back to a lot of the things that Chief Garvey said, and is some of the conversations we had over a decade ago, sitting in Washington, D.C. We had some ideas. And so what we want to do is, we don't need people who don't know the real problems picking and choosing the people that should be in the community doing this work. We need community folk choosing the people. As Quincy said, he knows his guys is on the staff better than anyone else. We need to develop an advisory committee to help us select not just the type of work we want to do, but the type of individuals we need to do this work, to produce the outcomes at the end. The outcomes are the most important thing that we need to get out of when we get in front of this committee. The other thing is, we need the city to understand, we need to start doing, if we want to see something different, we got to start doing something different. And they rehash and recycle the same ideas with a different twist over and over and over. And so we want them to understand that the community needs to be listened to, and this is a community effort, and the community is not going to take no, because we're at the point now where no means that we may not survive this if things get worse. We've been talking for the last 15 or 20 years about things getting better. They have not gotten better. And now that we won't have the resources, let's make sure, and as I heard Dewan say, let's make sure that we're feeding the people that can feed our people from the neck up and in the chest.
I'm going to welcome Bishop Harris. Thank you for joining us. Did you hear the numbers that Antonio gave out earlier? I want to get your thoughts on violence interruption work, as well as how we can collectively come together to come up with ideas on, the work in general.
I was not fortunate enough to hear his numbers. I think I came in later from another Zoom. But I can just tell you that this panel within itself already, just the time that I've been on, everything that everyone is saying is right. I've had the privilege of working with most of the people on this Zoom call, and from Miss Aaliyah to everyone else. I mean, these people know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about. So I'm just honored to be here, but I would like to hear those numbers. Even if you don't do them now, I would love to hear them at another time. So thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if it was appropriate to have him to do that now, or if, because I do understand you guys are, probably at a time crunch. And so I don't want to interrupt that process.
Yeah, he just went over them, but Antonio, I am gonna have you do some closeout as well as to tell us about, I know you went over briefly some of the things that have been effective in getting this funding for other cities. So if you had anything else that you wanted to add, as well as to do a brief cap.
Sure. I mean, so the numbers for Michigan, I'm looking at. So I think the state is getting $5 billion, and the city of Detroit, I believe, is getting 879 million. There we go, beautiful, right? And Wayne County is getting another 339 million bucks. So so this is just money that they're getting, right?
Oh,
It's very discretionary. And so what my recommendation is, as soon as possible, the coalition here in Detroit needs to make an ask, right? So start with the city of Detroit, 879 million. How much do you want to ask for, like, over the next 3 years? What would it take so that you can hire 100 more Quincy's and they would get funded, like we were talking about, full salaries, benefits, pensions, life insurance, all that kind of stuff that we know is humane compensation for this type of work. I would strongly suggest you make that ask public, right? And build as much of a coalition you can around it to continue to advocate for it. I mean, no one's going to say Detroit does not need more support around gun violence. So, I think, what I had mentioned before, part of the strategy is once you come up with a number, that you're relentless about that number, right? And that becomes the number in the press, on social media. You do op-eds with it. You just keep banging away at that number. I don't think I'm revealing too much. So Fund Peace California, I mentioned earlier that they're asking for a total of 400 million from a city and county of LA. They're going to be asking for 1.31 billion from the state of California for this. And part of how they came to it, and this is part of their mantra, is we want $1 out of every 10 that's spent on incarceration to be spent on violence prevention, right? So begin to think of it in these terms, right? Because how much does Michigan spend each year on incarceration? And we talked before about there's the cost of doing this and there's the cost of not doing this, right? And so the part of the way that you get to those millions of dollars for a shooting is the incarceration costs, right? When you're now incarcerating people for life, when you're, all the court, all the stuff attached to that. So we get used to asking for scraps, right? Because we think that's all we can get, or sometimes that's all we think we deserve. And so we need to, if we're going to really shift the landscape of this work, we need to ask for what we really need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so you guys know, and Aaliyah, I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier, it's important that the people on this call understand that historically our city leadership has divided and conquered us. Just saying what's true. If we come at them with strength, they're gonna start trying to pick us off and have somebody just go off and say, I'm just gonna get my in. And what we're telling, I've been meeting with some individuals in the city, if we're gonna do this, we gotta lock arms and we gotta stay together as an advisory committee and as a whole. With Aaliyah, she actually started laying this out before all this money came up a couple of years ago. And I've been around longer than any of you guys. I know Chief Gabi has too. They will divide us to conquer us if we don't rally ourselves together and stick together. That's the biggest thing. We cannot go back and run our mouths. And when we talk to the powers to be, we have to talk together as a unit. And we got to have the people, the right people to speak up. And I'll just say that right here, right now. That sounds like that is going to be Ralph Gabi and Aaliyah. And other folks just got to be ready to support them. Let's get this done.
I'd like to chime in there. I think that you're absolutely correct, Mr. B. I call Mr. B the Godfather, so everybody
You got a
knows.
lot of names going around here. Governor,
I don't get paid for
Godfather,
none of those names
Mr.
though.
B. All
No, he didn't,
right.
he didn't, he didn't ask. He didn't ask for it. It just rolled off the tongue, and I met it. It just is who he is. But just to, on the end of that sticking together, I put in the chat that I heard someone say this before, that our biggest problem is not a crime problem. Our biggest problem is relationship problems. People don't know how to relate to each other and don't work well with each other in that particular sense. And just on the back of what Mr. B just said, I think it's going to be important that if we're in fact going to win this battle at all, if we're going to win this war at all, that is going to come on the back of all of us having a relationship with each other. I would most certainly be more open to those types of relationship builders with you all, meeting Miss Aaliyah. I had heard her name before and even had met her once, but it was kind of a in passing meeting.
But she walks on water, so you have to catch her when she come on dry land.
But and that's absolutely true. But I just think that it's so important, meetings and gatherings like this. And I want to say this, I don't mean any harm when I say this. And again, Mr. B, Quincy, they all know I'm kind of a shoot from the hip type person. The Zoom meeting that I was just on a moment ago was one addressing Asian American hate crime. To see the amount of energy that's being placed into an issue area that has only largely been an issue area. We know that throughout history, yeah, but largely in part of what they're responding to, maybe a year or two, into the COVID existence. And to do that on the back of what we're talking about here and right now, and seeing the leverage of support, because when it became that concept, people pulled together and they stuck together, and you're beginning to see banks and financial institutions, and it's becoming the buzzword for the country. Meanwhile, those of us who are here, of African American descent, Latino descent, or whatnot, we're scrapping at the bottom, just trying to get someone to pay attention to the fact of. So I just wanted to put that on the back of how important I think meetings like this are. Miss Aaliyah, Mr. Bennett, Chief Godby, all of you, thank you so much for this, because this is what we need. And then I'll just end with, you made mention of funding, coming from, or a lot of the attention being put on incarceration. We've got a friend in Indiana, Isaac Hunt. Mr. B also knows very well, all very close friends. One of the things that he did was he went to one of the universities there in Indiana. Actually, he went to Notre Dame, and he got some of their volunteers to do some research on how much it costs medically for the medical institution to deal with persons whom had been shot, because he began to approach violence as a health issue. When he first started doing it, of course, everybody was dead set against it. But now people are starting to kind of line violence up as a health issue. And what he found, or the research that he found, was that doctors in the medical industry, they also were frustrated because they were spending billions of dollars on these repeated victims who were coming through gunshots. And it was causing them not only to work harder, but it was causing them actually to lose money in the hospital, which meant they were losing money in their pockets. And so he began a program there where their hospitals literally began to kind of fund, his violence intervention, or subsidize a portion of that. And so I also wanted to just put that out there as an idea as well. A lot of times we look at the incarceration, and we should, and we look at the law enforcement, and we should, but also including in that spectrum of, asking for funds or making them aware that we're inviting them into playing their role in this particular health issue, if their mantra is to do no harm and to prevent harm. then this is definitely a way that they can do that in the communities that, for the most part, they gain a lot of their work from. So I just wanted to add those few things, and everyone is just such a great meeting. I'm so excited behind it, and I'm looking forward to everything else that's going on. I just wanted to add those things as well.
I, I'll
Thank
just,
you.
I'll just piggyback real quick. That shift to thinking of this as a public health issue is so important. And I know Isaac in South Bend, so in a lot of places around the country do hospital-based violence intervention work, which can be linked right to the street outreach piece, right? So you stop retaliation by getting to guys when they're in the hospital. That's lots of times when people make a decision to retaliate. The cousin, the brother, whoever said, "Oh, I'm going to take revenge," like, so that's part of where intervention can happen as well. But if you think about it, right? If you think about crack cocaine, how is that dealt with? Criminal justice. If you think about opioids, how is that dealt with? Public health, right?
Mhm.
And so we got to get people to understand this is a public health issue. Gun violence is number one, is the leading cause of death for young Black men. Second leading cause of death for young Latino men, right?
Mhm.
According to the CDC, this is a health issue, right? And so the faster we can get people to think of this as a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue primarily, the sooner we'll get more humane ways of addressing it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we are, like I said, going to wrap up. I just wanted to get closing remarks from everybody. I would like to start, I'm going to end with Mr. Bennett. He's going to be our point of contact for people. So I would like to start with Brother Quincy, if you wanted to give some closing remarks on violence intervention, fund, peace, as well as anything else that you just wanted to say about the topic. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, this conversation is it's encouraging. Forever, I have been talking about it is going to take a joint effort
Mhm.
to address this issue. You know, we have to get out of our silos. We have to get away from the mindset that one particular agency or individual has the answers. Um, you know, we should not be competing against each other, and that's a shame that some of us have that mindset that we compete against each other. We're competing against something else. We're competing against the institutional racism, the systematic racism. We're competing against this design, this intentional design against Black and brown bodies. That's what we're competing against.
Mhm.
So it won't get done unless we stand together, stand united. So, Mr. B, what you just said, brother, I'm with you. You know, let's just figure out how to make this thing happen. And I also feel like we've got a small window.
Yep.
There's a small window, and that window is going to close if we don't do something now. Those
That's
old answers, those old solutions, we got to throw it out the window. It's time for radical solutions. So I'm on board. I'm honored to be a part of this group, and to play my part, to play my role, and let's push this thing forward.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Alea, if you wanted to give your closing remarks and your thoughts on fund peace.
Well, never want to speak after Quincy, right? He took us on home. But I will say that, you know, funding peace is, you know, super important. It's core to the mission of the work. We have to look at it practically. We have to think about the costs of relocating people. We have to think about the costs of staffing. We have to think about incentivized life plans. That's something we don't do yet around here, right? Folks don't get stipends. And sometimes the violence is economic violence. They're responding to their economic needs. We need neighborhood level engagement and infrastructure, right? Citywide projects, it's very difficult for a citywide project to respond to violence in every corner of a 139 square mile city. So it's a huge problem, but it's fixable, and I'm excited about this. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you, thank you. Antonio, if you want to give some closing remarks and your thoughts on fund peace.
I probably said plenty, but I'll just say that, you know, we're here to support you all in doing this work. I mean, we're doing this in cities all over the place. Just know that there's a national network of folks working on this. We're actually doing weekly fun peace community calls. It's actually happening right now. It started at 7 p.m. Eastern time every Wednesday at 7. You can register for it. We got Quincy. You should jump on those. We got folks from frontline organizations all over the country, and it's just a way for us to keep updating folks on what's going on with the federal piece, because we want everyone to just be on it. We want to help to figure out how to make sure the money gets to the ground, to the folks who need the funds, folks who need help applying for federal grants, all that kind of stuff. So part of the beautiful thing about doing all this is that it's building a lot of national community folks from different cities who are not always in conversation, but who are doing similar work. So that's a way for folks to continue to be plugged in.
Yeah, thank you. Ralph Gabi?
First, I want to thank Aaliyah and Keith for inviting me into this process. I am so excited just to hear like-minded people that are talking about solutions and not just identifying a problem. It doesn't take a rocket science to identify the problem. It takes a lot of skill, but a lot of goodwill and good people to really identify the problem. Just to quote Mother Joanne Watson when became chief, she said, "Chief, the best crime prevention tool is a job." And I think it's really important for us to redefine, not even redefine, we need to define what safety means to us. We gotta stop letting the police tell us what safety is. We have to stop letting politicians tell us what safety is. Because I don't feel safe in West Bloomfield because I see a bunch of cops. I feel safe in West Bloomfield because I see manicured lawns. I see homes that are well maintained. I see people walking their dogs, and if you go down Jefferson, you see people jogging at midnight. So and you don't see a police officer anywhere. So we cannot continue to say police officers and more cops are the answer to these problems. So this to me is a unique opportunity. I got a granddaughter now. I cannot leave this planet without leaving some imprint that shows that we know how to do this and there is a better way. So I'm honored to be a part of this group and I look forward to the work.
Thank you. Brother Dewan, if you want to give your closing thoughts on Fun Peace.
Yeah, I look at myself and I look in this room and I see when I first got out, I got introduced to Flip the Script. They brought me up there. My brother brought me in the room, Alea, you, Vu, y'all was in the room doing, Ceasefire was in there talking about stopping gun violence. I'm the dude, we all went to school together, you know, but I'm the one that chose to say, this is what I want to do. I want to live this type of lifestyle, because wasn't nobody putting no respect on peace. All the respect is being put on being violent. So with that being said, you got to put the same type of machine, the same type of energy behind protecting us. You know, me and my friends, I would love it for all my guys, and Alea seen it, Najanava seen it, Keith seen it, y'all done came to my community. My friends actually want to be a part of the solution, but they got to take care of themselves. They ain't got shit.
Yeah.
We ain't got shit, for real. We ain't got shit. So we forced to decide to go to work and spend all our time. You know how hard we'll go protecting ourselves, like not by attacking people, but by saving people. So like my community, my neighborhood, I mean it, I'm standing on it. My community and my neighborhood, individuals from over there, they ready to work. So, you know, I've been kind of emotional all day, Najanava, you can tell. But because I've been dealing with people, you know, and I'm honored from where I come from. And I love the fact that individuals that gave me a chance to take on a role of responsibility in this work.
Yeah.
As big as the role they got. So shit, I'm ready to get to work. And you know, I'm honored. And I know the people that I come up with will be honored and they're gonna work their ass off.
I wanted to go to Bishop Brother Harris after that, but I'm gonna give a pause since the cuss word. And
Well, you got two pastors. You got Ralph a pastor too.
Oh,
But he
I'm
done heard
sorry.
worse.
love Jesus,
I'm
but I
sorry.
don't like the fact. So don't use
I'm
me.
There
sorry.
she is.
I'm
it just
sorry.
you've already given your goodbye. It wasn't a good interlude, boy.
Let me cuss sometimes.
No. Bishop Harris, if you would like to give your some thoughts on fun peace and
Hey, doing this work, you learn to be the constituent of many brothers and sisters. So nothing offends me. I'm not easily offended. You can't do this work. But I would just like to add to that. Again, I'm so elated to be a part of this and to see it work. To build a brighter future, you cannot use the blown out candles of the past, but you have to use the light of the vision that you have for what is to come. And I believe that that's what's here today. Not seeing and spending so much time talking about what is and what was, more so putting our energy into what can be. I know a lot of times people say that I am, I'm an idealist, but it's a problem with me that people would have a problem with someone being an idealist. So yes, I am futuristic in terms of thinking. Don't let the title bishop fool you. I'm probably unlike any other bishop you've ever met. In this, that I really and Mr. Bennett again can tell you, Chief Godby can tell you, they've seen me in circles that don't even necessarily have anything directly to do with this from this angle, because I really believe in this city. I believe in the youth of this city, and I believe we can do it. I'm not just saying it as a caption phrase. I honestly and seriously go hard because I believe it can be done. And so I will just leave with that. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. And I'm ready to continue rolling up sleeves and get into work.
thank you. And I'm gonna have Brother Keith Bennett take it on home. You can tell us what name you want us to go by with you, the governor. No, I'm joking. Go ahead, Brother Bennett.
I'm honored. I'm touched. Why nothing can convey the emotions that's going on in me right now. We've been fighting the spiritual warfare for a long time with everything but love and togetherness. And right, Quincy, you right, because we didn't have the resources, but we're in a spiritual warfare. And I'm moved by the Spirit. I'm on force based on the Spirit. Quincy and I and some guys that probably, and Tony, we met in Chicago. Was it 3 years ago, Quincy? Just off the cuff. And what I shared, I listened to these young guys. They were all, I'm always the oldest guy in the room. And I'm upset about that. I'm always the oldest guy in the room. But as I listened to them, I said, do you understand? Are you listening to each other? And they said, what you mean? I said, you're sitting here talking about every time you go and ask somebody for some money to fight the problem that should be easy for them to say yes, they're telling you no. I said, look around this table. Look at the talent at this table. Look at the brilliance at this table. Look at the passion at this table. God don't do things by accident. We're all here for a purpose. We had people from Indiana. We had people from Chicago. We had people from, I said, this is no accident. We have what we need in people. We just need some resources, and we need to stop letting people tell us no. Right. And so I go back to my work with Ralph. We knew this was a spiritual fight. We talked about it, and we were derailed for years. And God has stepped in now and put us all smack back with national people at the table. We're in a spiritual warfare. Let's carry this spiritual. And let me say this. We don't dare quit on our people now. Don't dare quit on our people now. They've been quit on all their lives, even by their families. Don't dare quit now. Let's get it done. That's all I have to say.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you guys. I hope that people watching on YouTube and Facebook will follow up with us. We'll definitely be posting updates from our committee. We welcome input from the community. You can reach us at forcedetroit.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you all. Peace and love, and we'll see you all June 12th, or we'll see you all in June for our next town hall.
God
Peace, y'all.
bless.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.